The transport ship docked at 9 with a soft thud. Inside the ship 12 beings from different worlds stood up from their seats. They were all cadets. They had come from far corners of the galaxy to train together at the famous Alliance military station. Among them stood 2 humans. This was the first time humans had been accepted into the elite program. The galaxy was watching them closely. Cadet Park stretched his arms and smiled at the alien beside him. The alien was a massive reptile creature with 4 arms and scales that shone like metal. That did not smile back. It simply stared at the human with cold yellow eyes, turned to look at his companion. She was a young woman with short black hair and dark eyes. Her name was. She stood completely still, looking at nothing and everything at the same time. "We made it," said to her. "Can you believe it? 9, the best training station. The whole Alliance." Did not answer. She picked up her bag and walked toward the exit. Smile faded a little, but he followed her without saying more. The station was enormous. Bright white corridors stretched in every direction. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved through the hallways. Some walked on 2 legs, some walked on 4, some float in the air. The smell of different atmospheres mixed together in a strange soup. A tall insect-like creature waited for them at the main hall. It stood on 6 legs and had a head shaped like a triangle. Its eyes were large and black, and when it spoke, its voice clicked and buzzed. "I am Commander Axe," it said. "Welcome to 9. You are here because you are the best of your species. For the next 8 weeks, I will make you even better, or I will break you. There is no middle ground." The cadets stood in a straight line, counted them quickly. There were 30 cadets in total. 2 humans, 5, 8, 6, and 9 others from species he did not recognize. They stood together in a small group. They were thin and delicate with pale blue skin and large eyes. They were telepaths. They could read minds and feel emotions, had heard stories about them. They did not like surprises. Commander Axe walked down the line of cadets. He stopped in front of each one and looked at them carefully. When he reached, he paused for a long moment. "Cadet," he said, "you are one of the first humans to join our program. Do you have anything to say?" Looked up at him. Her face showed nothing. No fear, no excitement, no emotion at all. She simply looked at the commander with those dark, empty eyes. She did not speak. The silence stretched on. Other cadets shifted uncomfortably. They whispered to each other in their rough language. They tilted their heads, confused. Stepped forward slightly. "Commander." "Cadet is. She needs time to adjust. Humans sometimes take a while to feel comfortable in new places. She will speak when she is ready." Commander Axe looked at, then back at his mandibles clicked together slowly. "Very well," he said, "but in this program, communication is survival. Remember that." "Cadet." He moved on to the next cadet. Let out a small breath. He glanced at, but she was already looking away, her eyes scanning the room like a hunter, watching for danger. The first day was filled with orientation. The cadets learned where to sleep, where to eat, and where to train. They learned the rules of the station. They learned about the different species they would be working with. At dinner, sat beside in the large mess hall. The food was strange but edible. Around them, aliens talked and laughed and argued. They ate raw meat with their bare hands. Sipped glowing liquids through thin straws. They clicked at each other in their musical language. "You should try The blue stuff said too, pointing at a dish on her tray. It tastes like chicken. Everything in space tastes like chicken, apparently. Ate in silence. She did not look at the food. She did not look at her eyes moved constantly around the room, watching every movement, tracking every being. Large shadow fell over their table. Looked up and felt his stomach drop. Standing before them was huge, even for his species. His scales were dark green, and his forearms were thick with muscle. His name would later learn was Al. So, these are the famous humans, Al said. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. I expected something more impressive. We are just cadets. Said carefully, same as you. Al laughed. It was not a friendly sound, same as me. Little human, my people have been warriors for 10,000 years, your species. Just learn to leave your own planet. You are not the same as me. He leaned down close to his breath. Smelled like blood and metal, and this one does not even speak. Is she broken? Is she afraid? Continued eating. She did not look at him. She did not react at all. Al's eyes narrowed. I am talking to you, human. Still nothing. Might as well have been alone in the room. Something flickered in Al's eyes, anger maybe, or confusion. He was used to making others afraid. This small human female showed him nothing. She is deaf, perhaps, one of the other called out. No, Al said slowly. She hears me. She simply chooses not to answer. He stood up straight and looked down at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away, his heavy footsteps echoing through the mess hall. Released a breath he did not know he was holding. That was intense. Are you okay? Put down her fork. She looked at him for the first time that day. Her eyes were dark pools with no bottom. Looking into them was like looking into deep space. She did not answer. She simply stood up, picked up her tray, and walked away. Watched her go. He remembered the girl he had grown up with, the one who laughed loud and fought hard and never backed down from anything. That girl had disappeared somewhere between Earth and here. Across the mess hall, a pair of pale blue eyes watched the silent human leave. Cadet was but she had spent time among humans. She knew their ways better than most of her kind, and she knew that something was very wrong with Cadet. When reached out with her mind to read the human's thoughts, she found nothing. Not silence, but nothing. A wall so thick and so complete that it felt like a physical thing. In her 30 years of life, she had never encountered a mind she could not at least touch. This human was different. This human was closed in a way that should not be possible. Looked at her fellow and shook her head slightly. They would need to report this to the commander. A mind that closed was not healthy. It was not natural. It was dangerous. In her small quarters, sat on her bed and stared at the wall. The room was simple: a bed, a desk, a small bathroom, a window that looked out at the stars. She did not see any of it. She saw fire. She saw blood. She saw faces twisted in fear and pain. She heard screaming that never stopped. Even when she covered her ears, her left hand began to shake. She grabbed it with her right hand and held it tight until the shaking stopped. Somewhere in the station, a human officer named sat in his quarters and read a file on his data pad. The file was marked classified. It contained everything that had happened on Colony Outpost Myra 76 months ago. It contained the name. Instructor read the file twice. Then he set down the pad and stared at the ceiling for a long time. "What are you doing here, girl?" he whispered to the empty room. "What are you trying to prove?" The stars outside his window offered no answers. They simply burned in the darkness, cold and distant and silent, just like Cadet. The second day of training began before the sun rose on any planet. Alarm bells rang through the station at 500 hours, and the cadets had exactly 15 minutes to dress, eat, and report to the main training hall. Was already waiting when the others arrived. She stood perfectly still in the corner of the hall, her eyes watching the door. She had been there for an hour, unable to sleep, unwilling to try. Commander Axe marched them through combat drills until their muscles screamed. He made them run through zero-gravity chambers until they vomited. He tested their weapon skills with blasters and blades and things that had no human name. Did everything she was told. Her movements were smooth and precise like a machine following a program. She scored in the middle of the group, never the best, never the worst, perfectly average. The dominated the strength test, the excelled at strategy games, the moved through zero gravity like they were born for it. Each species had its own advantages. The humans were supposed to be endurance specialists. That was what the Alliance files said. Humans could keep going long after other species gave up. They could heal from wounds that would kill others. They could adapt to almost any environment, but showed none of this. She performed exactly as expected and nothing more. Watched her with growing concern. He tried to talk to her between exercises, but she never responded. She ate alone. She trained alone. She existed in a bubble of silence that no one could break. On the third day, another human joined their training group. Her name was, and she had transferred from a different squad. She was tall for a human woman with long hair tied back in a practical braid. Noticed immediately. She saw how the other cadets avoided the silent woman. She saw how hovered nearby like a worried brother. She saw how eyes never stopped moving even when the rest of her body was completely still. She does not talk, asked during a break. Shook his head. Not since, not for a while. Since what? Looked away. That is her story to tell if she ever decides to tell it. Studied the silent cadet for a long moment. Then she walked over and sat down beside on the bench. "Hello," said. I know you do not want to talk, and that is fine. You do not have to say anything. I just wanted to sit with you." Did not respond, but she did not move away either. From that day forward, made it her mission to be near. Whenever possible, she sat beside her at meals. She partnered with her during team exercises. She filled the silence with easy conversation that required no response. "My mother thinks I am crazy for joining the Alliance program," said one evening. "She wanted me to be a doctor. Can you imagine me cutting people open? I would faint at the first drop of blood." She laughed at her own joke, did not laugh, but her eyes flickered toward for just a moment. It was progress, small but real. On the fourth day, the cadets made their formal complaint. They gathered in Commander Axe's office and spoke in their soft musical voices. "The human is not right," said their leader, a pale creature named. "Her mind is completely closed to us. We cannot sense her emotions or her thoughts. It is unnatural. It is dangerous." Commander Axe considered this. Humans are not telepaths. Perhaps their minds work differently. "No," insisted. "I have touched human minds before. They are open, emotional, easy to read. This one is different. It is like her mind does not exist at all, or like it exists behind a wall so thick that nothing can pass through. What do you want me to do? Remove her from the program. She is a threat to unit cohesion. The commander's mandibles clicked together slowly. The alliance has worked hard to bring humans into our fold. I will not remove one simply because your species finds her uncomfortable. If she follows orders and completes her training, she stays. The left unhappy, but they did not argue further. That night found standing alone in the observation deck. The large window showed an endless field of stars, cold and beautiful and terribly far away. Cannot sleep? Asked, did not answer her. Reflection in the glass was pale and ghost-like. Stood beside her and looked at the stars. When I was young, I thought the stars were holes in the sky, holes that let light from heaven shine through. My grandmother told me that each star was a soul watching over us. She glanced at. Do you believe in souls? For a long moment there was only silence, then so quietly that almost missed its lips moved. She did not speak but was good at reading lips. The word was yes. Felt her heart jump, but she kept her face calm. She did not want to scare back into complete silence. Me too, said simply. Me too. They stood together in the darkness for a long time, two humans looking at the stars. The fifth day brought combat simulations. The cadets entered a large chamber filled with holographic projectors and sensor fields. The room could create any battlefield, any enemy, any scenario. Today we face the most dangerous predator in the galaxy. Commander Axe announced. A ripple of fear passed through the cadets. Even the shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew about them. They were monsters, 8 legs each, ending in a blade sharp enough to cut through armor, armored shells that could stop most weapons, compound eyes that saw in every direction at once. They hunted intelligent species for sport. They had destroyed colonies and killed millions. The alliance existed primarily to fight, though. This simulation will test your responses to an attack. The commander continued. Work as a team. Protect each other, and remember this is only a test. The creatures cannot truly hurt you. The simulation began. The room transformed into a colony. Outpost buildings rose from the floor. Streets appeared. The lighting changed to the orange glow of an alien sunset. Then the holographic creatures poured out of the buildings with terrible speed. They moved like nightmares given form, all blades and hunger and death. The cadets scattered. The roared and charged forward, their forearms swinging. The fled to defensive positions. The buzzed orders in their clicking language stood frozen. The moment they appeared, something happened to her. Her face went white, her body locked in place like a statue. Her eyes went wide and empty. Shouted, move. She did not move. A holographic rushed toward her, blades raised for the kill. Threw himself at her, knocking her to the ground just as the blade passed through the space where her head had been. Snap out of it, he yelled, but was not there. Her eyes stared at something only she could see. Her lips moved silently, forming words that made no sound. The simulation continued. Around them, the cadets fought and died. Virtual deaths, and respawned to fight again, but remained on the ground, unmoving, her mind trapped somewhere far away. When the exercise ended, Commander Axe called the cadets to order. He looked at with his large black eyes. Cadet, you failed to respond during the simulation. This is unacceptable. Stood up slowly, her face was still pale, but her eyes had returned to the present. She looked at the commander, but said nothing. In real combat, your failure would have cost lives, remember that. He turned away and dismissed the group. Instructor approached after the others had left. He was an older man, with gray in his hair and lines around his eyes. He had seen many things in his life. He recognized the look on his face. Myra 7, he said quietly, you were there. His eyes flickered to him. For a moment, something alive moved behind the emptiness, something that looked like pain. I read your file, continued. I know what happened. I know what you did. He stepped closer and lowered his voice. I also know that freezing in that simulation is not who you really are. The woman who survived Myra 7 does not freeze. She fights, she survives, she does whatever it takes. Stared at him. Her left hand began to tremble. That woman is still inside you, said you. Just need to remember her. He walked away, leaving alone in the empty simulation chamber. That night she did not sleep at all. She sat on her bed and stared at her shaking hand, trying to remember the person she used to be. Outside her window, the stars burned in the darkness, cold and distant and silent. Waiting. Day 6 passed in a blur of training and tension. Al grew bolder in his harassment. He made comments about weak humans whenever was nearby. He pushed past her in hallways, using his massive bulk to knock her off balance. He laughed loudly when she did not respond. The other cadets watched but did not interfere. They were feared throughout the galaxy. No one wanted to make an enemy of Al, except leave her alone, said during dinner, stepping between Al and the look down at her with amusement. Another human comes to defend the broken one. How touching. She is not broken. She is just different. Al laughed. She is weak. She cannot even speak. In my culture, such a creature would be left for the predators. We are not in your culture, said firmly. We are in the Alliance. Here we protect each other. Al's narrowed. For a moment it seemed like he might strike her. Then he simply snorted and walked away, his heavy footsteps shaking the floor. Hurried over. That was brave also. Stupid, probably both agreed. She looked at Are you okay? Was staring at the place where Al had been. Her eyes were dark and unreadable. After a moment she turned and walked away without acknowledging either of them. She will be fine, said, though he did not sound convinced. That night walked the corridors of the station alone. She could not sleep. She could never sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw them, the faces of the dead, the screaming colonists, the children she could not save. She walked until her legs ached, trying to outrun the memories. It never worked, but she kept trying anyway. At 3:47 hours the alarms began. Red light flooded the corridors. A siren wailed through the station loud enough to wake the dead. Commander Axe's voice crackled over the speakers. All personnel, this is not a drill. Hostile forces have breached the station. All cadets to shelter positions immediately. Repeat, this is not a drill. The lights flickered somewhere in the distance. There was an explosion. The station shuddered, stood frozen in the corridor. Listening to the sounds of chaos, she heard running footsteps. She heard screaming in languages she did not understand. She heard the sharp crack of weapons fire. Then she heard something else, a clicking sound, a scraping of blade on metal, a noise that she knew in her bones, in her blood, in every cell of her body. They were here. They were really here. The shelter was behind her. 30 m down. The corridor, she could see the sealed door through the small window. She could see faces pressed against the glass. Other cadets, they were pounding on the door trying to get it open. The emergency lockdown had sealed them inside. It was designed to keep people safe, but it had also locked. Outside, she heard the clicking sound. Again, closer now. She turned slowly. They came around the corner like a nightmare stepping out of a dream. It was exactly as the files described, 3 m tall, covered in dark armored plates that shone wetly in the red emergency lighting, 8 legs, each ending in a curved blade that looked sharp enough to cut through steel, a head like a demon's skull with compound eyes that reflected the light like shattered rubies. There was blood on its forelimbs, blue blood, green blood, red blood. It had already killed. The creature paused when it saw her, its head tilted to one side like a dog examining a curious insect. Its mandibles clicked together slowly, stood perfectly still. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Her left hand was shaking violently. Behind her, she could hear screaming. Her name was pounding on the door, shouting for someone to open it. The other cadets were pressed against the glass, watching. In horror, they began to move toward her. It moved slowly at first, almost casually. It knew she was trapped. It knew there was nowhere to run. It was enjoying the moment. Did not run. She could not run. Her legs would not move. Her body was locked in place by the same terror that had frozen her in the simulation. The creature came closer, 2 m now. She could smell it, a sharp chemical odor like acid and death. She could hear its breathing, a wet rasping sound that made her stomach turn. 1 meter it raised, one blade arm ready to strike. Behind the door was crying, was still pounding on the glass. Someone was praying in a language did not recognize. This blade came down and something inside broke free. She moved later. She would not be able to explain what happened. Her body simply acted on its own without thought, without conscious decision. 16 months of frozen silence shattered in a single instant. She stepped to the side as the blade came down, missing her by centimeters. Before the creature could recover, she was moving her hands, reaching for the blade arm, grabbing it just below the joint. The hiss in surprise. No prey had ever fought back, not like this. Twisted her body, using the creature's own weight against it. She pulled hard and the stumbled, thrown off balance. Its blade slashed at her, catching her left arm and cutting deep. Blood poured from the wound, hot and red. She did not feel it. She did not feel anything except the cold, clear focus that had kept her alive. On Myra 7, creature slammed into the corridor wall, was on it before it could recover. She was inside its reach, too close for its long limbs to strike effectively. Her hands found the soft joint where the armored plates met. She knew anatomy. She had learned it the hard way in 19 hours of hell, surrounded by blood and fire and death. She pushed her fingers into the joint and twisted. The screamed. It was a terrible sound, high and piercing like metal being torn apart. It thrashed wildly, trying to throw her off. Her left arm hung useless at her side, but she did not need it. She used her right hand, her knees, her elbows, her teeth. She used the wall and the floor and her own body weight. She knew where the nerve clusters were. She Knew where the armor was thinnest, she knew exactly how much force was needed to break through the kitten. The creature tried to grab her with its other limbs. She dodged, ducked, weaved between the slashing blades. One cut her shoulder. One grazed her side. She did not stop. She could not stop. If she stopped, she would die. If she stopped, others would die. She had stopped on Mira 7 just for a moment, just to catch her breath, and in that moment 17 people had died. She would not stop again. The crash to the floor was on top of it now, her knees pressing down on its armored chest. Her right hand found the soft spot beneath its jaw. She pushed with all her strength. The creature's skull cracked. Its compound eyes went dark. Its body twitched once, twice, then went still. Knelt on the body of the dead, covered in blood, both alien and human. Her left arm hung limp and useless. Her face was splattered with gore. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps. The emergency lockdown released. The door behind her slid open, stumbled out first, followed by and the others. They stopped dead in their tracks, staring at the scene. Before them, the silent cadet who had not spoken a word in a week stood over a dead, the most feared predator in the galaxy. She had killed it with one arm and no weapon. Al was among the cadets who came out. The massive looked at the dead creature, then at the small human woman. His yellow eyes were wide with something that might have been fear. Commander Axe arrived with the security team moments later. He pushed through the crowd of cadets and stopped beside the body. Report, he said. No one could speak. They simply stared at instructor. Pushed through the crowd. He approached carefully, slowly, like one might approach a wounded predator. Cadet, he said softly, it is over. You can stand down. Looked at him. Her eyes were not empty anymore. They burned with something fierce and terrible and human. She opened her mouth and for the first time in 16 months spoke. 16 months before the night on 9. There was a colony called Mira 7. It was a small world on the edge of Alliance space. 3,000 colonists lived there, mostly farmers and scientists studying the local plant life. The planet had rich soil and clean water and skies that turned purple at sunset. It was peaceful. It was beautiful. It was far from the war. That was what everyone believed. Sergeant was 22 years old when she arrived at Mira 7. She was part of a small security force, 40 soldiers sent to protect the colony from pirates and bandits. The posting was considered easy duty. Nothing ever happened on the frontier. Farming worlds did not mind the quiet. She liked the colonists. She played with their children. She helped with the harvest. She learned the names of every family in the settlement. Lieutenant Han was her commanding officer. He was a kind man with gray in his beard and laugh lines around his eyes. He had served in the wars 20 years ago and had the scars to prove it, but he never talked about those days. He said the past was the past and the future was what mattered. Respected him more than anyone she had ever known. Came on a Tuesday. 3 ships dropped out of hyperspace without warning. The colony sensors barely had time to register them before the creatures were already landing. 60 hunters, maybe more, pouring out of their ships like a flood of nightmares. The first attack killed 12 soldiers before they could even reach their weapons. Lieutenant Han, the survivors, he ordered to take a squad and protect the civilian shelters. He would lead the counterattack himself, hold them as Long as you can, he said, rescue ships are coming, you just need to hold. Those were the last words he ever spoke. To her, gathered her squad and ran. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of battle, screaming, explosions, the terrible clicking of blades. The civilian shelter was a reinforced bunker beneath the main administration building. 200 colonists had already made it inside. More were running toward it. Mothers carrying children, old people struggling to keep up. The reach them first watched 3 children die in front of her. She watched a young mother torn apart while reaching for her baby. She watched an old man try to fight back with nothing but a farming tool and be cut down in seconds. Something inside her broke, not into pieces but into something sharp and hard and cold. She stopped running away and started running toward the monsters. Her squad followed her. They were all dead within the hour, but in that hour they killed 11 and gave the colonists time to reach the shelter. When the last of her soldiers fell, kept fighting alone. She did not have a plan. She did not have hope. She simply could not stop. Every time she thought about giving up, she heard the children screaming. She saw the colonists she had promised to protect. She felt the weight of every life depending on her, so she kept moving. She found weapons where she could, a combat knife from a dead soldier, a rifle that she used until it broke, then used as a club, a piece of rebar pulled from a collapsed building. When she had nothing else, she used her bare hands. She learned anatomy through trial and error. She discovered that their joints were weaker than they looked. She found the nerve clusters hidden beneath the armor. She figured out that they were slower after eating and faster when they smelled blood. She killed 3 in the first hour, 4 more in the second. By the 5th hour, she had lost count. The creatures began to notice her. They called to each other in their clicking language. They started to hunt her specifically, drawn by her scent and her blood and the trail of dead she left behind. It did not matter. She kept killing. In the 7th hour, she found a group of colonists hiding in a basement. 47 people, including 9 children. They looked at her with terrified eyes. Follow me, she said. Stay quiet. Do exactly what I say. She led them through the burning colony, hiding in shadows, moving between buildings, killing any that found them. It took 3 hours to reach the main shelter. When they arrived, she sealed the door behind them and went back out into the hell. She did this 4 more times. Each trip she saved fewer people. Each trip she found more bodies. In the 12th hour, I caught her arm and twisted. The bones broke in 3 places. The pain was so intense that she screamed, and that scream was the last sound she made voluntarily for 16 months. She killed that with her other hand. Then she kept moving. In the 15th hour, she found Lieutenant Hand's body. It was barely recognizable. She sat beside it for exactly 60 seconds, not crying, not speaking, just sitting. Then she stood up and continued. In the 18th hour, the rescue ships finally arrived. Alliance military dropped from the sky with heavy weapons and burning fury. They drove back the killed. Most of them chased the survivors back to their ships. When they found she was sitting in the ruins of the command center, around her lay the bodies of 9 she had killed over the final hour. Her arm was shattered. Her body was covered in cuts and bruises and alien blood. Her eyes stared at nothing. She did not respond when they spoke to her. She did not move when they touched her. She simply sat there silent, empty, like a machine that had finally run out of power. The medics counted her kills, 17. In 19 hours, more than any single soldier had ever killed in one battle. The officers counted the survivors, 207. People owed their lives to 3,000. Colonists had lived on Myra 7, 207. Survived. In the months that followed, underwent physical therapy for her arm. The bones healed, but they were never quite right. Sometimes her left hand would shake. Without warning, the nerves still damaged from that terrible night. She also underwent psychological evaluation. The doctors used words like trauma and survival guilt and post-traumatic stress. They recommended rest and counseling and time, but they could not make her speak. Heard everything they said. She understood everything they meant, but when she opened her mouth to respond, nothing came out. The words were there, trapped behind a wall of ice and pain. Every time she tried to speak, she heard the screaming of the dying. She saw the faces of those she could not save, so she stopped trying. When the Alliance announced the first human cadets for the 9 program applied, the doctors said she was not ready. Her commanding officers said she needed more time. Everyone said it was a bad idea. She applied anyway, and because her record was exceptional, because she had killed 17 and saved 200 lives, the Alliance accepted her. Now standing in a corridor of 9 with a dead at her feet and blood running down her arm, the wall inside her finally cracked. "I remember all of them," she whispered. The words came slowly, painfully, like water forcing its way through a frozen pipe. Her voice was rough and broken, unused for so long that it barely worked. "Every single one I could not save. I hear their voices when I sleep. I see their faces when I close my eyes." Instructor stood very still, listening. "So I do not sleep," continued, "and I do not close my eyes, and I do not speak, because if I start screaming, I am afraid I will never stop." Tears ran down her cheeks, mixing with the blood, but her voice grew stronger with each word. "But I also remember the ones I saved, 207. They are alive because I did not stop. Because I could not stop, because humans do not stop." She looked at the cadets surrounding her, at Al, who could not meet her eyes, at who was crying silently, at who was smiling through his own tears. "I am Cadet," she said, "sole survivor of Myra 7. I killed 17 before my arm broke, and 4 more after. I saved 207 lives." She stepped over the body of the creature she had just killed. "I have been silent because I forgot why I should speak." Her eyes met instructors. "I remember now. The aftermath of the attack kept the station busy for hours. Security teams swept every corridor. Medical crews tended to the wounded. Engineers sealed the breach in the hall where the ship had cut through. 7 station personnel had died in the attack. 14 more were injured. Only 3 had made it aboard, but 3 was enough to cause terrible damage. Had killed 1. The security forces had killed the other 2. In the medical bay, a doctor wrapped wounded arm in healing bandages. The cut was deep but clean. It would heal in time, leaving another scar to add to her collection. "You should rest," the doctor said. "Your body has been through a lot tonight." Nodded, but did not lie down. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, processing everything that had happened. Appeared in the doorway. Her eyes were red from crying, but she was smiling. "Can I come in?" Nodded again, walked over and sat beside her on the bed, for a long moment neither of them spoke. "You saved us," finally said. "If that thing had gotten through the door, it did not." The words came easier now, still rough, still painful, but easier, like a door that had been stuck for years was finally starting to open. "No," agreed. "It did not because of you," appeared next, pushing past the doctor with barely an apology. He stopped in front of and looked at her with bright eyes. "There you are," he said. "There is the eye. Remember, for the first time in 16 months. Smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but it was real. "I never left," she said. "I was just lost." Sat on her other side. "We are glad you found your way back." Commander Axe arrived an hour later. He stood at the foot of his bed and studied her with his large black eyes. "Cadet," he said, "your actions tonight saved many lives. The Alliance is grateful." "I was just doing my duty." Said no. The commander's mandibles clicked slowly. "What you did was far beyond duty. I have reviewed the security footage. I have spoken to the other cadets. What you did was extraordinary." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "I have also read your classified file. I know about Myra 7. I understand now why you did not speak and why you froze during the simulation." Looked down at her bandaged arm. "Simulation made me remember," she said quietly. "I saw them again, all of them. The ones I could not save, but tonight was different. Tonight was real." Looked up at him. "When it is real, I cannot freeze. I cannot stop. If I stop, people die. I learned that on Myra 7. Commander Axe nodded slowly. "Humans are strange creatures. You break in ways we do not understand, but you also heal in ways we cannot imagine." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "The remaining weeks of training will continue as scheduled. I expect to see you in the morning." "Cadet." "Yes, Commander." After he left, Al appeared in the doorway. The massive looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. His yellow eyes refused to meet. "I came to." He stopped, started again. "I wanted to say you were wrong about humans." Finished. For him, Al's scales flushed darker. "Yes, I was wrong about humans, about you. I accept your apology." The blinked. "I did not actually apologize. You were going to. I saved you the trouble." For a long moment, Al stared at her, then slowly his mandible spread in what might have been a smile. "You are not what I expected human. Neither are you." He nodded once and left without another word, but something had shifted between them, something that might in time become respect. The remaining weeks of training passed quickly. Still did not speak much, but when she did, people listened. She answered questions in class. She gave orders during team exercises. She even made occasional jokes that left her staring in surprise. She still had nightmares. She still woke in the middle of the night, covered in sweat, hearing the screaming of the dead. But now she had friends who understood, would sit with her until they shaking stopped, would tell stupid jokes until she almost smiled. Even Al, in his rough way, would stand guard outside her door when the nights were particularly bad. She was not healed. She might never be fully healed, but she was no longer alone. On the final day of training, the cadets gathered in the main hall for graduation. Commander Axe called each name in order of rank. Those who had scored highest went first. "First in class," he announced. Cadet. The hall went silent, walked forward slowly, her boots echoing on the metal floor. She climbed the steps to the platform and stood before the commander. Your scores in the final weeks were exceptional. Axe said, your leadership during the incursion saved lives. You have proven yourself worthy of the alliance's highest honors. He pinned a medal to her chest, a small silver star that marked her as an elite graduate. Congratulations. Cadet looked out at the assembled cadets, humans and aliens, predators and prey, warriors from a dozen worlds. They were all watching her, waiting for her to speak. She thought about Myra 7. She thought about the 3,000 people who had lived there and the 207 who had survived. She thought about the faces she still saw when she closed her eyes. Then she thought about the future, about the battles still to come, about the people she might yet save. I spent 16 months in silence, she said. Her voice was clear now, strong, carrying to every corner of the hall. I thought if I did not speak, I could not feel. I thought if I stayed quiet, the pain would eventually go away. She paused, letting the words settle. I was wrong. The pain never goes away, but that does not mean we stop fighting. That does not mean we give up. She looked at Al at all the beings who had become her family. Humans have a saying. It goes like this: fall down 7 times, stand up 8. It means that no matter how many times life knocks you down, you always get back up. You always keep going. You never stop. Her eyes swept across the room. That is what it means to be human. We are not the strongest species. We are not the fastest or the most dangerous, but we do not stop. We never stop, and that is why in the end we will win. She raised her right hand in a salute. I am survivor of Myra 7, first in my class, and I am proud to stand beside all of you. The hall erupted in applause, humans and aliens together, pounding their hands and claws and appendages in appreciation. Later, after the ceremony, the cadet named approached. She had kept her distance since the attack, unsure how to face the human she had wanted removed from the program. I owe you an apology, said. I thought you were broken. I thought your closed mind made you dangerous. You were not entirely wrong, admitted. I was broken. I was dangerous. Maybe I still am, but you are also strong, stronger than I knew. Reached out and touched hand gently. For the first time, she felt something from the human's mind, not thoughts, not words, but a feeling, a warm, burning determination that seemed to have no end. Your mind is still closed, said in wonder, but I can feel your spirit. It is like a fire that refuses to die. Smiled. That is the human way. In the years that followed, the story of Cadet spread throughout the galaxy. The called her blade that waits. The called her the silent storm. The called her she who remembers. But the humans, those who knew what Myra 7 had cost her and what 9 had given back, called her something simpler. They called her survivor. And somewhere in the darkness, between the stars, they began to learn a new word. They learned it the way all predators learn about things that hunt them back. They learned it in blood and fire and death. The word was human, and they learned to fear it.